grade 1 and in grade 2. Now, let me just quickly introduce myself. This is Neha Chauhan here. I am a teacher expert at Cuemath with a teaching experience of more than 3 years. Subjects which I primarily teach are mathematics and reasoning, and the regions that I cater to are India and US. Now that we have the introduction for today's masterclass already in place, I suggest you all, students, parents, and teachers, to grab a notebook and a pen so that you can jot down all the important concepts learned in today's masterclass for your future references. Also, you'd be able to solve the problems alongside me in today's masterclass. So the first thing that we'll be going through is the table of contents so that we know what all are we going to cover in today's masterclass. We'll be understanding the core concept of analogy. Then we'll see the objectives based on which we'll have problems of basic level type and of advanced level type. Both of these types would be really interesting and engaging. And finally, we'll have the learning outcomes, which is basically the takeaways, whatever you have learned in today's masterclass. So before we start with today's actual masterclass, before we dive into that, here is a test for yourself which says soap is related to wash in the same way as broom is related to dash. So there is a certain action which is related to soap. That is, a soap is basically used for washing. And the same way broom is related to what? So there is a certain action which is related to broom, just as soap is related to wash. So that is what you have to answer. So here we have some options for you, which is clean, dust, sweep, and floor. So we clearly know that a broom is basically used for sweeping, which in turn cleans the floor or any surface. So the action which is related to broom is sweep. Now this is what is an analogy. That is, you saw that there is a certain relationship between an object and an action, or an object with another object. So we'll go in detail here where we'll be learning what analogy is. So an analogy is a comparison between two objects or a system of objects that highlights respects in which they are thought to be similar or are connected. So there is a connection, there is a special connection between two objects, a certain way in which they are related to each other, just as we saw that soap is related to or is connected to the action of washing. The same way broom is connected or is related to the action of sweeping. So this is a certain unique relationship that exists between these two types of, it could be two types of objects, it could be two types of words, numbers, an object and an action, could be anything. So whenever there is a certain unique relationship that exists between any two things, it could be, an object with its action, or it could be two words, or it could be two numbers, anything, that is called as analogy. And that connection you can apply to different types of objects, different types of pairs. Just as we saw that soap and wash is one pair, wherein there is a certain relationship between them, the same relationship exists between a broom and the action of sweeping. So the relationship of the object and the action is similar in both of the pairs. So this is the core concept of analogy. Now we'll see what the objectives are. So it says a pair of related terms, figures would be provided to you in the question. And a similar relationship is to be established between two other items or figures in the question. So just as I told you, there is a certain way wherein two things, two objects, two numbers, or it could be anything, a pair of anything, there is a certain relationship in that pair. That relationship you can apply to any other pair as well. So any other pair which has got the same sort of relationship, same sort of connection, is called as analogy. So here we see what are the applications. So analogy is used in parts of speech such as idioms and phrases, like we say, shine bright like a star, shine bright like a sun. So sun is connected to shining, or a star is connected to shining. So, so these are the idioms and the phrases. It helps us making in comparison. We say that, you're tall as a tree. So these are the comparisons that we can make. Just as I told you, sun is always compared with shining, bright. Star is always considered with shining and bright. So these are the comparisons you can make. And analogy is also used in science in different ways. So now that we have done the application part, here we come to our very first question of today's masterclass. It says here, there is a certain relationship between a pair of figures given on either side of the double colon, which is this. So there is one pair here on the left side and one pair on the right side. But on the right side, one of the objects is missing. So it says here that knife is related to tomatoes in a certain way. There is a certain relationship between knife and tomatoes. You have to establish the same relationship between an object that should come here in place of this question mark with the tree. Now what we know for sure is that a knife is basically used to cut vegetables. In this case, we have tomatoes. So a knife cuts tomatoes. So that would mean what cuts a tree? So we have options as a spoon, a fork, a knife, and an axe. So we clearly know that the first three objects that we have, which is a spoon, a fork, and a knife, would not be able to cut the tree, but the last option, which is the option D, which is an axe, can cut the tree. So the correct answer to this question becomes option D, which is an axe. So this unique relationship, which was similar to both of these pair of objects, knife cuts tomatoes, axe cuts trees. I hope you all understood this question. We'll go on to the next one. Now we have the same thing. It says if a doctor is related to stethoscope in some way. So stethoscope is an instrument. It's a tool of a doctor that he always has with him. You can see it's around his neck. Then in the same way, a woodcutter is related to dash. You see an axe in his hand and there is another tool in his hand. So clearly from the options we can say which is the correct answer, because he already has that tool in his hand, and that tool is basically a saw, because this is an axe. The other tool that we have is a saw, and it's a hand saw, which is also made used to cut woods. So the correct answer to this question becomes option A. That is, a doctor has his stethoscope as his tool, as his primary instrument. The same way, a woodcutter, a man who cuts woods, would have axe and saw as his primary tools. And in the options, we did not have an axe, but we had a saw, so we chose that as the correct answer, ruling out bat, a hockey, and a stapler, which are not the tools of a woodcutter. Moving on to the next question. Okay, so again, we have a certain relationship between the first pair on the left side of the double colon. And then we have to establish the same relationship in the pair which is on the right side of the double colon, but one of the objects is missing and has been replaced with a question mark. So here we see the question mark. So the object in the second object in the second pair is missing. We have to find out which would be that object. So we'll have a look at the options first. Okay, so we'll first have to understand what is the relationship between the first pair, the objects in the first pair. So in the first pair, we have a rectangle and the second object is a mobile phone. So if we would look at it, they are of the same shape. A rectangle and a mobile phone are of the same shape. So a cylinder matches with which of the following shapes given in the four options. So a cylinder doesn't match with a cone, but it definitely matches with a cold drink can. It doesn't match with a book, and it doesn't match with a bowl which is in the shape of a sphere. So the correct answer to this question would become option D, which is a cold drink can, because that also is in the shape of a cylinder, a three-dimensional shape. I hope you understood this question, which was very easy. It's just that we had to figure out the similar shapes and establish the relationship between the objects in the pair. As rectangle was related to a mobile phone, a cylinder is related to a cold drink can, which is in the shape of a cylinder. Moving on to our next question. So we again have a pair on the left side of the double colon, in which we have both the objects, but the pair which is on the right side of the double colon doesn't have the second object, which is missing, the second figure which is missing. So we have to find that out. We'll have a look at the options. So these are all the options which we have. Now we'll have to first understand how the two figures in the first pair, which is this one, how are they both related to each other? So in the first figure, which is this, in the first pair, has a circle at the outer side, and inside it we have a square. And the second figure in the same pair has done what? Therein they have swapped, or they have interchanged the positions of the two shapes. That is, now the circle has come inside and the square has gone outside. So we can establish the same relationship between the figures in the second pair. So the first figure in the second pair has a triangle which is at the outside and a circle which is at the inside. So we will swap the places of the shapes. That is, we will have the circle at the outside now and the triangle in the inside. So like this, the only option which we have is option C, and we have established the same relationship as we had the relationship between the figures in the first pair. So is the relationship between the figures in the second pair now, and so we have the answer for our question as option C. Moving on to the next question. Okay, so these are the options here. Again, we have the first pair which is complete, having both the objects in place, but the second pair doesn't have the first object. We'll first have a look at it, that how are they related to each other. So if we see the first basket in the first pair, this basket has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 apples. Now these 6 apples are equally distributed in 2 baskets. They are divided by 2. So 1, 2, 3 in one basket, half of them in one basket and half of them in the other basket. So you half them and put them in 2 different baskets. So that would mean combining these two, combining the number of apples that we have in in these 2 baskets is the number of apples that we have in the first basket. So same should be the logic for the pair which is on the right side of the double colon. If we would combine apples which put together are there in these 2 baskets, the same number should be there in the basket which should come here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So here there should be 4 apples in the basket. Now let's see which of the options has got 4 apples in the basket. So option A has got 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. B has more than 4, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. C has 1, 2, 3. D has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the only one with 4 apples in the basket is option A. So that becomes the correct answer to our question. I hope you all understood this question. If at all you have any doubts, you can put them in the comment section and we'll be addressing to all of those doubts and queries. Moving on to the next question. So here we have some numbers in place. The first pair has got 4 with its mirror image. So there are 2 numbers, one which is the actual number, the other which is the mirror image of the first number. And the second pair, which is on the right side of the colon, doesn't have the second number in the pair. Let's have a look at the options. So as I have already told you that this number is the mirror image of the first one. In a mirror image, what happens is the top part and the bottom part remains unchanged. It doesn't change. But the left becomes right and the right becomes left. So the horizontal line at the top would be as it is and the curve here would be as it is. But this slant line, instead of being on the left, now would be on the right and the curve would go like this. So if you would look at the options here, we would see that option D is exactly the same what we have drawn here, and that is the correct answer to this question. So the relationship here was that you have a number and its mirror image. So we had 4 and its mirror image. We had 5. So we had to find out what is the mirror image of number 5. So that is how it is. And so the correct answer to this question becomes option D. Moving on to the next question, which is of advanced level. So we have some numbers and alphabets here, or combination of both. It says if 2 is related to B in some way, then in the same way dash is related to E. So let's have a look at the options. So these are all the options which we have. Now we'll write that 2 is related to B. 2 is related to B. Then what is related to E? Now if I was to write alphabets, the alphabetical series, we have A, B, C, D, E, so on, so till X, Y, Z. And we can number the position of each alphabet. That is, alphabet A is at the first position, B is at the second position, C is at the third position. So if you would see that when we said that 2 is related to B, so basically at the second position in the alphabet series, alphabetical series, the letter which we got was B. So now we have to figure out E comes at which position in the alphabetical series. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It comes at the 5th position. So If 2 is related to B in some way, then in the same way, 5 is related to E, because at the 5th position in the alphabetical series, we get the alphabet E. So the correct answer to this question becomes option C. I hope you understood this question. This was a mix of the numbers and the alphabets, because they used the positioning of the alphabets in the alphabetical series and related them to each other. Moving on to our next question, we have, if this triangular figure is related to another triangular figure, the only difference, if you would see, is the type of shading to them. This is heavily shaded, darkly shaded, and this is not so darkly shaded. Then the same way, this darkly shaded circular figure is related to which one? So let's have the options in place. All right. So if you would look at the relation between the two triangular figures, we would see that the outer border was darkly shaded. Then we had the blankly shaded border, which is basically white in color, and then the inside triangle was shaded in gray color. Now this, when gets related to this, the inside color, which was gray, comes to the outer boundary, outer border, and the two inner triangle get the light shading, which is the white color. So the same thing should happen here. That is, we'll have a circle, inside this another circle, inside this another circle. So the shading which is at the innermost circle is gray, so the outer part should become gray and the inside should become lightly shaded. So like that, the only option which we have is option B. Same way as we had got the triangle, the second figure in the first pair, which is the triangular shape, this one. Outer boundary being lightly shaded and the inner boundaries being not at all shaded. Or you can see, shaded in color white. So option B becomes the correct answer to our question. I hope you all understood this. With this, we move on to the third question. So you see here that there is a pair of figures on the left side, which is complete because we have both the figures in place. First one is a certain shape, and the second figure in the same pair is double of it, but one of them is shaded. Now, the pair which is on the right side of the double colon has one triangle and the second figure is missing in it, and we have to fill in for that. This figure, that is the second figure in the second pair, is basically missing. So whatever is the relationship that exists between the two figures in pair 1, the same is to be established between the two figures in pair 2. So let's have a look at the options. So these are all the options. Now, if you remember what I said, that this is a certain shape which got doubled. That is, we repeated it twice and the second one was shaded. So what we have to do is, whatever is the shape which is given here, which is a right triangle, we have to repeat it twice. So I repeat it twice like this, and the second one would be shaded. So like this, the only option which we have is option A, because they're exactly the same. They're not flipped on either side, because if we would see, option D could be confusing, but they are facing opposite sides. They're not facing the same direction. One is this side, the other is this side. So this cannot be the correct answer, because the two figures in the second figure of first pair were exactly the same without having any orientation to it, exactly the same way. So we'll have the two triangles exactly the same way, facing the same direction, just the second one being shaded. So the correct answer to this question, as we've already pointed out, is option A. So I hope you understood all of these questions in today's class, which were based on analogy. All you have to do is to identify what is the relationship between the first two figures, the first two figures in the first pair, or the objects in the first pair, and then establish the same in the second pair. With this, we come towards the last part, which is the learning outcomes. So what we understood is predicting individual differences between pairs of elements. We saw that in a lot of pairs. We carefully observed, what is the unique relationship between the objects in a pair or the figures in the pair, and then we could rule out some of the options. Also, we did the analysis of, numbers, words, object and an action, or figures together. So there was an analysis that we did before we could answer the question. So these are some of the learning outcomes. Now, an announcement for all the parents and the teachers who really wish that their children should get enrolled for TUCO 2020. The registration is already open. It's already open since August, so you can look for all the details that you want for your child to get registered right after this masterclass. You'll get all the details that you're looking for, and you can get your child or your student registered for TUCO 2020, which is the ultimate Cuemath Olympiad. So as we all saw in today's masterclass, how logical reasoning inculcates the ability to think logically in a child, they start thinking in an innovative manner. They also strive to get to the answer in the shortest possible way. And this is exactly how a student gets trained by a Cuemath expert, and all of it is being provided in Olympiad masterclasses by Cuemath. So with this, I would like to introduce the TUCO registration forms. Every student who wishes to take up the real-time Olympiad examination by Cuemath, please go ahead and click on the link given in the description box below. The registration amount for TUCO is rupees 200 only, and the benefits that you get on registering for TUCO is that you get a complete course curriculum to prepare for it, which is worth rupees 5,000. So every time we have a masterclass, an Olympiad masterclass as we had today, which is scheduled, you can join us there and then later can work on extensive sheets on the same topic through the course curriculum provided when you register for TUCO. So make sure you do not delay and register yourself to get the most out of the curriculum worth rupees 5,000 just for rupees 200. And with this, we'll be winding up today's masterclass.